So welcome, Chantelle. You work with the London Wildlife Trust. So just tell me a little bit about what job you do there, and really what brought you to the London Wildlife Trust in the first place.
Sure. So I'll start in the reverse. So I've always been fascinated with wildlife. I don't remember when it started. I feel like everyone has these like magical moments where it was like I saw a shark in the bay or blah 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 blah, but I really don't remember having one of those moments. It's just I've always just really maybe it was pets, animals that started it off. I didn't really have pets of my own when I grew up, so I was obsessed with everyone else's. And everyone found that, not everyone found it quite weird, but being my heritage is British Jamaican. So my dad was born in Jamaica and my mum was born here, but her parents are Jamaican. So I think being a Black woman who's quite interested in animals was always a bit weird for some people, because I did find that a lot of Black people didn't like animals. So it was always just a bit like, oh gosh, there she is petting another dog, obsessed with another dog. But I kind of followed that throughout my throughout academia. And I had a teacher who really supported me in secondary school, and she helped me to bring out the campaigner in me. So I used to campaign for animal rights, Kentucky Fried Cruelty, all of that. Went vegetarian from a very young age. Now I'm vegan. I've taken my family with me as well, and they've come on this journey, so it's amazing. So yeah, I've always had a mum that really supported me in this kind of like weird career choice, because at first it started off me wanting to be a vet, and then I was like, no. So I really had to do my own research, because you'd see like Attenborough on television or people in these documentaries and be like, how do I get from here to there? And there was no rule book for it. When you want to become a doctor, you have to do this and do that. So I really had to kind of find my own way. And so I ended up going to university and studying animal behavior and wildlife conservation, and which was amazing. And at the end of it, I came out and I was like, I'm ready for my job. Where is it? Wasn't there. It never is. So it took me a good 3 years to actually get into the sector. And so I've been in the sector for about just over 2 years now. And I actually started through a program called the Keeping It Wild project, which is a London Wildlife Trust project that aims to inspire, empower, and equip young people with the skills needed to get into the sector. So they have like a variety of strands, and the ones that I was involved with on a voluntary basis was the youth forum, and then secondly the traineeship, which was like, oh my goodness, when I saw it on the sort of job vacancy board, I was like, this is insane, because I was about to give up on my dream. I was like, I need to do something easier because this is too hard. And it was a paid 3-month traineeship for 16 to 25-year-olds. I was literally just turning 25, and it was aimed at either young people that are from a socio-economically deprived background, or if you are Black, Asian, or minority ethnic. So it was like something amazing, because not only were they addressing that there's an issue within the sector with diversity, but they were actually doing something about it. And it wasn't one of these, work for free things that are a huge barrier to people of colour. So that was amazing. So that's how I got into it. And now I am the Great Northwood Project Officer. So it was the project that I was shadowing as a trainee. And then as my traineeship was coming to an end, a vacancy opened up on the Great Northwood team. So I applied. I never thought I'd get it, but 2 years later, I'm here. So yeah, that's the Great Northwood landscape, and it's got this amazing history that just kind of runs through the veins of South London, which I had no idea existed before I started with London Wildlife Trust. So it's amazing to know that in South London you have these pockets of woodlands that are just amazing.
I know that you were interested in animals as a youngster, but were you interested in wild spaces also?
Yes, definitely. My mum was quite proactive in taking us on like bike rides through the woods, and going to parks. And we always used to travel everywhere, because I was born in Doncaster in South Yorkshire, then moved to Peterborough, then to London. So I had quite a nice overview of Britain. But yes, I was definitely interested in wild spaces. I think definitely the pull though was animals. So at first it was kind of like, whereas now my work is habitat focused. Before I was very animal focused, like, oh, I'm going to go and work and do, you know, behavioral studies on animals. But then as I got older, you realize that if you want to conserve more animals than just the one, you can work on the habitat.
Absolutely, and so you're working in you know, wild areas and wild habitats in London. I mean, London, people tend to think about London as being, you know, completely built up. Don't really recognise where those wild areas are. And quite often they're actually in areas which are quite close to you know, quite sort of, you know, dense you know, urban conurbations, if you like. Is there a problem in terms of, you know, people, particularly from black backgrounds, actually going to those places? What is actually stopping you know, more people of African descent actually going and enjoying the wildlife which is effectively on their doorstep?
Yeah. So a lot of black people, as you know, like you sort of just mentioned, are in these concrete jungles. And that's kind of all you grow up knowing. And you know, also maybe these local spaces, these green spaces aren't safe to go to. I remember doing sort of a workshop with young people, and I was just going on about, yeah, go to your local park, blah 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 blah. And then it dawned on me, actually, you know, a lot of these young people were in areas where there was a lot of knife crime, a lot of, you know, different types of crime, and so going to their park, it's not just easy. You just can't just go skipping through your park when it's unsafe to do so. So for a lot of people from African descent, that's their reality. And also the reality is that the environment and engaging with wildlife is not on the, you know, the top of the list of priorities, because, you know, black people do have, or people of color have, a lot of other things that they have to worry about. Um, they're often, we are often, sorry, the poorer communities. So accessing those green spaces is, like I said, not a priority when you've got to think about where your next paycheck is coming from. Also, in terms of representation, in terms of signposting, in terms of language, a lot of these spaces seem inaccessible. National parks are not visited by black people a lot when we are paying taxes to do so. So there are many barriers, I think, and, you know, in terms of going to the countryside as well, it feels like a very unwelcoming space, and a space that there could be potential to be racially abused and things like that. And having gone on like walks with Flock Together, which is like a bird watching collective for people of color, and us in these, like, you know, huge numbers going through these kind of I guess rural communities, we get stopped and asked, oh my goodness, what are you guys doing here? And it's because, you know, it's like no one's ever seen a group of black people with binoculars walking through woods before. And that shouldn't be so. That is the reality. So when you go to these spaces, you're looked at like an outsider, and you do feel like an outsider. So I think it has a lot to do with, you know, accessibility, a lot to do with signposting, representation, and just the kind of feel as well, and priorities.
How much would you say the fear, if you like, of encountering racism in the countryside is reality or perception?
Very interesting question. I would say a lot of it is reality, to be honest, because I remember going into it was doing a sort of trip, and we ended up going to this very small town in Wales. And immediately, and I think it's something that is so not understood if you're not a person of colour. It's like, you know, when you're booking a holiday, you have to think about, oh my gosh, am I going to be racially abused in this place? Don't want to go there. And so I went to this like really small town in Wales, and literally, like, you know, we were walking through, about to step into a pub, and a guy sort of said something about colour. It wasn't racial abuse, but he said something like, are you looking at my skin colour or something? And I was just so confused, and it was like, what? And it's, you know, it's like, you wouldn't believe it. And I was with a white girl at the time, and she was just like, what? And I'm like, yeah, you see, it's like these little things that you have your backup already, and you don't want to experience these things, so you don't go. So I think a lot of it is reality. To some people, it might be perception because they don't experience it. And when you try to explain certain microaggressions and the small things that you notice, people staring at you or people looking at you for a little bit longer than is comfortable, it's really hard to explain. So it is everyone's obviously personal experience, but I do think it is a massive reality.
Yeah. So are you on a mission to try and change things?
Yes.
Tell me about the mission.
So it's really difficult because a lot of the time I am doing my job, going day to day, and you feel like you're not doing enough because to bring people into the space, because I feel like once you enter a space, especially as a person of color, it's almost like it shouldn't be this responsibility on your shoulders, and it's very heavy to carry, and it's a massive pressure that is put on us. But personally, I feel like I've come into this space, I've noticed that there's a massive problem here with diversity, and I just want to fling open the door for other people to come in now. So a lot of time I do feel like I'm not doing enough, but then people kind of remind me, like, just by being in this space and being the representation, that's one way of doing it. So that's really comforting to know. By just going day to day and doing what I do, seeing the surprise on people's faces, I rock up and they're like, "Oh, you're in charge." I'm like, yes, I am. And also just talking about it. So I do, I've been asked to do quite a few like talks and things like that about more diversity and inclusion. So recently I did one with Heal Rewilding, which is a charity that I volunteer with, and they had their first in-person event, and I did a talk on how we can make rewilding more accessible and more inclusive. So yeah, it's kind of just going and talking about it at any opportunity. And I'm on the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Board at London Wildlife Trust as well. So there's exciting things going on there. And I think I feel really lucky to be at London Wildlife Trust because they're very forward thinking, very, very keen to diversify the sector. And I think I would be a little bit shocked if I went to different organisations, or maybe not in London, where maybe that's not their focus, which would be...
Because there has been a criticism of the environmental sector as a whole, the green sector as a whole, that it's been criticised as being very undiverse. Organisations like the RSPB, I don't know if this is the case today, but certainly, a small number of years ago, it was extremely white. Really hardly any black representation there at all. So, the sector itself, clearly needs to change, doesn't it? I mean, what's your message, if you like, to the environmental sector to get its house in order?
Yeah, so you're completely right. I mean, things have changed, but not so much that it's, the sector is the second least diverse sector in the UK, second to farming, and I believe it's 3.5% of people in the sector are non-white. So it's still a huge problem. And my message would be to these organisations that you need to do something about it. And funders need to do something about it, because money talks. And if these funders were putting prerequisites that weren't just ticking box exercises, making it that whatever project you do, you have to ensure that you're including people from diverse communities, that you're reaching out to people from diverse communities, engaging, that I think would be a huge game changer. And a lot of these funders are doing that sort of thing. Our project's funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, and I noticed something in their kind of clauses as well. So definitely in terms of funding, definitely. And programs, getting into schools and going into areas that aren't the normal white dominated areas, like going out and meeting people where they are and understanding the issues and not assuming the barriers. I think organisations need to be very much on the ground and very, very present, and not just kind of preaching about wildlife. It's about, being outside and being outdoors has a huge benefit on people's mental health. And Black, Asian, people from African descent, we're the people that suffer from mental health the most. So that could be a pull. So I think it's about thinking outside the box. You're not just preaching to the choir here. You've got to do some real work. So yeah, I would say they need to do it, and it needs to be ingrained in every bit of their work. It's not just like their work and EDI over here. It's like EDI has to run through the veins.
Absolutely, well said. A little bit about your own experience, when you talk to other people of colour about what you do, your journey, to the wildlife sector. What sort of, reaction do you tend to get, and how do you respond to that?
Well, I don't know if it's because my degree was a bit of a mouthful. When I tell people I studied animal behaviour and wildlife conservation, they always go, literally, like almost always go, what? Because it's just so unusual. I think it's unusual anyway. But also just because, like I said before, I always kind of got this notion that when I was younger, and I'm not saying this is the case at all, but it was like this notion that Black people didn't like animals, so it's kind of, if you're met with like surprise, like, oh, okay, wow. And I think it's just so, yeah, it's just so unusual. I mean, this is not something that, as people from African descent, a lot of the time we're pushed to go into careers that are that offer high salaries, whereas wildlife conservation doesn't. It's a known thing, and that's another thing that needs to be addressed, because that is a huge barrier. You don't want to go into a job that's going to have a low salary, and that is the reality, unfortunately. So that needs to be changed as well. But yeah, so it was just something that people aren't pushed to do, and it, like I said before, it's something that is not like a clear pathway. It's not like maybe being a doctor where the steps. It's you have to go searching and finding out where you can go and how to get there, which I found quite difficult, and I kind of had to let go of this really stiff image of what I wanted to do with my career. Instead, I just kind of kept saying yes to different opportunities and going, oh, okay, yeah, I like that, I'll go there. Don't like that, I won't go there. And there's a lot of doing that. So yeah.
So in terms of the type of things that people have said to you, sort of anecdotes, if you like, can you give me any examples of where people of colour have where you've had that engagement about what you do, and about the importance really of enjoying wildlife for all the reasons that you've actually said, and where those conversations go really?
So as part of my project, we worked with some young people from NCS, which is like a government funded initiative, which kind of, I think it's like a voluntary basis, and they do like a variety of different tasks. So we had a group of young people that came into the woods, and they all came like geared in their like Nike tracksuits, like Jordans and everything, which is really great to see. But they came and they had the opportunity to ask questions to us. And like the first question was like, why do you do this? And do you get paid to do this? And questions kind of like that. And it was like explaining to them, yes, this is like a viable career choice. I've chosen to do it. I get paid to do it. And it was like this kind of like look on their faces, like, oh my gosh, what? Like almost like you're crazy one. But also that's kind of really cool. I never knew you could do this as a career. Which is something that I do get a lot, like people going, so are you volunteering or are you working? I'm like, yeah, I work, I actually do this for a living. So, and with that NCS group, they were just completely so like, they were a bit kind of despondent. They didn't look like they really wanted to be in the woods. And then we had another day with them, and they did some hedge clearings. They cleared around this hedge in Norwood. And they were absolutely loving it. It started raining, and me and my co-project officer literally like darted for the trees to kind of like shelter. And we turned around, they weren't behind us, they just were carrying on in the rain. And we were like, oh my goodness, just completely like changed their perception, and they were just absolutely loving it. So it's like, once you get young people, or even, like people of color into these spaces, you can see there is a spark, there's something there that they want to connect to. But it's just kind of like it's a little bit buried, but I definitely feel like it does get sparked. I've also had post-COVID a lot of Black women coming through like the woods and going, throughout COVID, we found they were walking through, we found that this was like a haven for us. We never knew it was here. we went exploring during COVID, and it like saved us literally. So it's kind of like seeing how people connect in different ways as well. And talking to Black people, it's not, you know, we don't always know the Latin name for everything or know what that is or what, you know, but like Black people have been recycling for ages. We recycle tubs, we use ice cream tubs for this, for that. You've got your grandma who knows every like herb going or every like plant going, and it's that which is so ingrained in us and so like innate, that we just have to tap into. So when you have these conversations with people, it's not wildlife can seem like such a far away thing when you are in a concrete jungle, but you know, we are wildlife, and our ancestors would be working the land, would know the land, and like even our grandparents like have that connection. And it's not always how maybe white people would connect, with knowing everything, all the plants names and blah 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 blah. It's like this really different way, this very like cultured way, I would say.
It's an important point you made as well about, you know, sort of, you know, the ancestry and connection with nature, because it's not that far away, and it feels like sometimes, you know, being in Britain, particularly in cities, that that's sort of lost. But it's not completely lost though, is it? It can be sparked.
Exactly, yeah. And I did a feature on Springwatch not long ago, and the amount of responses that I got was insane anyway, so positive and so nice and beautiful. But the ones that really stuck out to me were the ones from Black women who were like, one was like, you know, my daughter's mixed race and she saw you on television and it was so nice for her to see someone to look up to. And so many Black women just being like, it was so nice to see you in that space, because like, you know, I like wildlife, and it's nice to see someone else that looks like me on television who is the same. So it just kind of like struck me that, you know, there was this narrative, it's not so much now, but there was this narrative that we are the harder to reach audience, and that, you know, we don't like wildlife, that's why we don't engage. But it's completely untrue. You know, I'm a testament to it myself, but knowing like my family, knowing you know, my friends, there is that connection. It's just in a different way. So yeah.
How much difference do you think, you know, having like presenters on programs like Springwatch and, you know, the other sort of nature programs, you know, makes a difference? Obviously, you know, you mentioned about the kind of feedback that you receive personally, but you know, is that changing the image, if you like, of wildlife for in a more sort of fundamental way, not just for Black communities, but actually for white communities too?
Yes, definitely. I'm a huge advocate for representation. I mean, just yesterday I watched the Harder They Fall movie. I don't know if you've seen it, and I was literally, me and my family were like, oh my gosh, this is the most amazing thing. And I think that's so hard to explain to make, like, to white people, for instance, who always see themselves on television, who always see themselves in these spaces. For us, it's like, this is major, that's amazing. So seeing like Black cowboys, for instance, I was like, love it. But so for me, that's, you know, seeing Gillian Burke on Springwatch, for me, that's amazing, you know, because I grew up looking at David Attenborough, Steve Backshall, and you know, they're amazing, but they're white. And so you kind of look and you think, oh, that's nice for them, or that's really cool and so far away, but you don't see yourself in that space. So yeah, for Black people, it's this real awakening of like, I feel like your heart almost, because you're like, wow. And going on flock together walks and being in a group of people of color, bird watching, is a feeling I really can't explain. It's like a high. I remember rounding the corner and seeing them at the train station and being like, oh my God, this is insane. I love it. So for us, it's completely essential. But like you said, even for non-Black people, seeing us in that space and it kind of registering their brain that that's normal, you know, this should be normal, and this is how it should be. I think that's absolutely so important, so that when we are in the woods and we're going through our binoculars, we're not getting stopped going, why are you here? When, you know, if you saw a group of white people with binoculars, you know why they were here. Bird watching. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And
Change.
you mentioned at the beginning, you know, that you have a campaigning streak to you as well. I'm just wondering whether actually, you know, having more people of colour actually going out and enjoying the nature and what it has to offer will actually potentially encourage more people to campaign to hold on to those spaces, because you know those spaces are contested spaces, that land is contested, that it's very much in demand by developers, especially in areas like London, where land is valuable, and you know people want a piece of it. Do you see? What do you think about that? You know, because you know sometimes you have, you know, encroachments, if you like, on areas of natural importance, and there isn't really a campaign to stop it. And sometimes there is, but sometimes there isn't. And you know, really, you know, people of colour should be, you know, if you know, if we live near that area, very much involved in those campaigns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, your own story is a testament to that. You know, you were just like, well, that's my local patch, I'm going to absolutely get involved. So I think, yeah, completely. Once people are attached to a place, once they see the value in it, once they kind of can see, yeah, the advantages of it, I think they will be more inclined to take action for it. But a lot of, you know, these spaces in urban areas look very much disused and very much like kind of trashed or whatever. So people don't see the value in it. So when people want to come and build sneakily or whatever, it's like, okay, well, it's just a bit of a wasteland anyway, get rid. But if they were to know what a haven it was for wildlife, or what can be done to serve the community there, definitely, I think more people would take action. And I do think, you know, campaigning is seen as a very white dominated space again. And we know with Extinction Rebellion, when that first came out, there was this huge debate about whether it was kind of excluding Black people and people of colour, because it was like, okay, well, you have to be willing to get arrested. And it's like, okay, well, that's all well and good for you. But actually, you having a criminal record and me having a criminal record is a completely different thing. So it was this kind of like debate, which I think was really healthy to have, and how these campaigns and how these campaigners and activists can open it up to other people, and how we can do our bit without getting arrested, basically. But yeah, definitely, I think if you see the value in something that's close to you, you will take action for it.